welcome to any new ones. This is Wednesday Night Sessions. I am your host, Mitch Nobis. Longtime viewers will recognize the janky basement office that I record these things in. Joining us tonight is novelist Patrick Nevins. His new book, Man in a Cage, is recently out, or at least I just recently got my copy. Maybe it's been out for a while, but it's new to me. And I'm thrilled to have him joining us. So I'm just going to pass it over to Patrick. Patrick, take it away for a reading. All
right. Thank you for having me, Mitch. Yeah, Man in a Cage came out in August of last year from Malarkey Books. If you don't know about the Malarkist, check it out. I'm going to read just the first couple of pages. In these first few pages, the narrator of the novel, Richard Garner, who is a real-life primatologist, the novel's based on, there's a short scene where he's going to start thinking back to the major events of the novel. So the first few pages actually take place several years later. So this is from chapter 1. My gorilla, Dinah, is not long for this world. She was a vigorous little creature until this recent turn, as robust as the day I purchased her in Gabon. But despite the great care I have taken with her, from a West African jungle to the Bronx Zoo, I fear she is resigned to the same fate as the other two gorillas who have survived passage to America. A slow, pathetic death by starvation. God bless Mr. Engelholm, the zookeeper who has appointed himself Dinah's nurse. Mr. Hornaday's doctors have prescribed fresh air, so every day you may find the keeper pushing the pitiful ape about the zoo grounds in a baby carriage. She peers out from under the thick blankets that are necessary to keep her body warm and returns the incredulous stares of visitors with an emptiness that betrays her suffering. The illuminating factor behind her dark eyes is all but extinguished. Engelholm brings some levity to the scene by pretending to mistake the ape for a human child. Do you want to see the pretty buffalo? He asks in baby talk. To the ape's blank stares, he replies, hang it, you're a gorilla, not a baby. The act always elicits a laugh, but what the audience will not be allowed to see are the vain attempts by Engelholm and Hornaday and me to remove Dinah from the carriage and return her to her cage. She cries and fights. It is the most she moves anymore, until we set the carriage inside the cage and allow her to emerge from it on her own time. Only a few weeks earlier, Dinah showed none of these signs of resignation. Quite the opposite. Upon the arrival of a young lady from New York World, Dinah had knuckle-walked eagerly to the reporter, and the reporter, who had never been up close with an ape before, readily accepted the animal into her arms. Oh, you are a big girl, she said. The reporter, carrying Dinah like a child, followed me to the concrete room in back of the cage where the gorilla lived during inclement weather and sat upon a stool. Dinah sat upon the young lady's lap, sounding off with low grunts, while the reporter interviewed me, if it could rightly be called that. From the start of my career in Gabon, many of the men who have reported on me have been transparent in their aims at tearing me down, but I could not guess this young lady's agenda. She showed little interest in what I had to say about the gorilla's language. As I expounded upon the subject of my life's work, she held her ear to Dinah's muzzle and whispered back into the ape's ear. They were conspiring schoolgirls, and I, a learned pedagogue, speaking to the ether. I wandered away and let the girls do as they wished. My thoughts drifted across the Atlantic to Africa. Had not Europe done enough to that continent? An abominable slave trade, Christianity, and now war. Professor, the reporter called out, Dinah says that in New York, the sun stands no chance and the moon is only a memory. Why, miss, you've not only mastered Dinah's language in mere minutes, you've also discovered that she's a poet. Her words thrum like the rivers of Africa. Her breath is the jungle's mist. It does not require a skilled interpreter to discover that she wishes to know why she must remain entombed in concrete when you return to her forest. Miss, you may exploit Dinah and me for your little society piece, as I now see that's what this is all about. But could you do me one favor? Africa is being ravaged by Europe's greed. I would not describe to a lady some of the violence I have seen carried out against its natives. And now the continent is being ravaged by Europe's war. White generals are arming Africans, marching them into battle, marching them into death. I've seen war, and it isn't pretty. And for what are these Africans fighting? For the general's master's right to keep stealing their lands. When the war is over, the Africans who have survived will have to trade their rifles for whiplashes, unless they turn their rifles on their generals. So you may tell Dinah that she's better off here. I aim to return to Africa as soon as the war allows and pick up my studies, if the whole continent hasn't been laid to waste. Now, could you put that in your little article? The reporter's countenance had shed its girlish smile and all vestiges of cheekiness. I felt ashamed for having unleashed the storm of my thoughts on the girl's sunny conversation. Tell me, I said softly to her, what else has she told you? She whispered to Dinah. The ape's lips fluttered against her teeth. The reporter gave me a sympathetic smile. She's an enigma. Perhaps we are not meant to understand her. The Times has reported that Dinah is improving, but I have no faith that her appetite will remain and she will make a complete recovery. Nurse Engelholm's heart will break. Mine has already been broken twice. My chimpanzees, Susie and Moses. Susie, like the gorillas, succumbed from my failure to adapt her to this country's climate. And Moses, you must ignore the lies that have been spread about me and trust that I'm being forthright when I tell you of the unfortunate circumstances I met in equatorial Africa.
That is a whale of an intro. Like,
thank you. I really struggled over how to start this book, so that's nice to hear.
yeah, no, I mean, I feel like there's several hooks. Like the job of the intro is to hook, right? But there's a couple different hooks there, and I did every time I record one of these, I do the whole like. There's only two questions, and then I kind of devolve and go into tangents. But one thing I love is the kind of whole premise. There's so many books in Western literature that take kind of the opposite tack, right? Like the are colonialist in view. And I love the way that yours is kind of like as a shot across the bow from the jump, kind of takes the opposing stance, which is very cool, but also necessary. We need books that do that. So here, I'll transition that into my actual first question. So I'm absolutely fascinated by historical fiction writers because I'm not terribly good at research myself. So my first question on the show is usually something about kind of the writer's side of things, a craft question, if you will. So if you would please kind of fill us in, like what drew you to historical fiction? How did you go about the kind of behind the scenes of writing this, of balancing the whole historical accuracy versus, the narrative of the story, etc. Just kind of talk to us about that, if you would please.
Well, to be honest, this was my first attempt. I had not tried anything like this before. I was from my MFA and for, 5, 7, 8 years out, was writing short stories that were, about people I knew. And some of them are okay. But when I came across the story of this guy, of Richard Garner, I was like, that is crazy. And I thought, why don't I write that? And kind of right away, I was like, it's going to be too much for a story. So I saw it as a novel right away, because I was aware of stories that that were historical. At some point, it's probably 12 years ago, I read one of Jim Shepard's books of short stories where almost every story is historical in nature. And I was just blown away, like, oh my gosh, like I knew about historical novels, but short stories, like that's really cool. But I knew that this story, him, getting out there in the cage, trying to get his phonograph, because the idea is he's going to record the noises, the vocalizations that the chimps are making, and then play them back really slowly and make some sense of them, kind of figure out their language. And so I knew, okay, that's probably going to be pretty big. That's probably going to be a novel. And then once I started to, do the research, just more and more things came up that, like, okay, this is about colonialism. This is really, it's about, the scramble for Africa, and there's bicycles, the bicycle craze, and just all this. And who's allowed to be a scientist, all these things that I really had no idea about. I got to fold into it. So it was really fun to do, but it really was just kind of teaching myself, like, taking, deciding, how much from the research would I use as a framework for the plot, and where would I intentionally veer away from that because it served sort of the themes of the story. It was just a lot of experimentation over a few years to get a draft that I was really pleased with. And then since I've done that, I have written some stories, and I like writing stories that are, like these Jim Shepard stories that are historical in nature. And it's just fun. It's just fun to get out of the world we live in and step back into another one, whether it's the 1950s or the 1890s or the 1850s. It's just enjoyable to get away.
Yeah. It's also a couple of things I love about that answer, but one, it kind of sounds like you got the bug now. It's like you're turning yourself into a historical fiction writer. There's a lot I could say there. I mean, I love that this was kind of your first foray into it, that you kind of had the idea and therefore had to become a historical fiction novelist, not kind of that vice versa. Like, it seems like so many people that do historical fiction, they're history majors or something along those lines, history professors, and they're already drawn to it, and then they want to create a story around it, and you're kind of the flip, which I find really just kind of cool. It's a really interesting, unique angle, I would think, in the historical fiction world.
I should have been a history major or a biology major, to be honest,
for this story. Yeah,
because like I love history, and then I love natural science. Doing this, like, allowed me to go back into stuff that I loved as a kid, like Jane Goodall and chimps and other animals and things. And like I kind of forgot about all that stuff when I was teens and 20s, and writing serious fiction and reading serious fiction, and and it's like, oh, why did I stop being fascinated with that stuff? Because it's great material for fiction. I'm doing it, and there are people doing it better than I am too. So like, it's, I guess that'd be my, if I'm ever asked from young writers, what kind of advice would I give them? It's like, okay, think about things that you love and like make that what you write about.
Yeah. I mean, I love a lot of what you said there. Like, and just this notion that like there's always, well, one, we're always kind of reteaching ourselves how to write anyways. So starting a new venture, like, why not? Every time you start a new project, it's sort of like you forget every skill you've gained previously anyway. So why not tackle the cool idea, but also that in this case, like it's fun, right? Like tackle the fun idea. I kind of, I think we initially met on Twitter, and I'm always kind of bemused by people that act like writing on, there are a lot of people on, a lot of writers on Twitter will act like writing is putting on a hair shirt, like it's this horrible act. And like that, yeah, I mean, sometimes it makes me, want to bang my head against the wall, but I start from a place of fun. Like I enjoy this act of creation. And I kind of hear that in what you're saying too. Like the things we're drawn to as kids, we're drawn to because they're fun to us, So
Yeah. I wouldn't have written a book if I didn't enjoy it, because there's nobody pressuring me to do it. There's not much in the way of financial reward in doing it. It's just, yeah, just the act of, especially with the historical stuff, like just the learning involved, and then just having fun with it.
Oh yeah, you don't want to compute it out to like how much money do you make per hour, like the time put in 0.0001 cents per hour. That's actually a pretty solid transition to my other official question. See what I said? We've already actually covered like 5 questions here, but I always kind of laugh because, when I jumped on the Zoom, it's like I'm out of breath. Like I'm always running to these things. Longtime viewers have probably heard me opine about this before, that I'm also a dad and I try to squeeze the show in wherever I can. And sometimes that requires jumping through several hurdles. And if I may reveal a little bit of behind the scenes, that was true for you tonight also. We're actually doing this in a very tight time frame.
Exactly, yeah.
So talk to us about like the parenting and writing life then as well. You're talking about being a kid yourself. How do you find having children of your own informs your writing or presents obstacles, to your writing? Probably a little bit of all of the above.
Yeah. I mean, so just a little about me. So I'm a faculty member at Ivy Tech Community College, Columbus, Indiana. It's my 14th year, I think, full-time faculty member. So, the teaching load and administrative task and things like keeps you busy. I mean, that's life in a community college, I think. It's not like you're at some, liberal arts college or a big research institution with a big writing program, and I know they have tons of administrative tough stuff to do as well, but like I imagine they're carving out more time to write out of their day than probably folks in high teaching load situation like myself. So I used to be one of those like early morning,
Wow.
writers. I originally thought that hashtag AM writing was hashtag AM writing, with people who were like up at 5 and doing it. And so when my kids were smaller, I guess before they started school, I could get up and get out of the house. Like Starbucks would open at 5 o'clock. So I would go there and like write before things were going at home. I can't do that so much anymore because now I'm like getting them to school and walking the dog too. So mornings are kind of out. So I have to squeeze it in other places in my day, So yeah, I mean, it's a challenge just to find time to write. But my kids both love writing. So it's a cool thing we share. My son, he's 10, and he's writing stories, things. He's writing all the time, and he told me, he's like, when I finish this, can you think Malarkey can publish it? And I'm like, well, we can try, we can ask,
Ask, yeah, I mean, you can ask.
we can see. So yeah, they think it's, I think they think it's cool. The dad has a book out and they can see it on the library shelf and things like that. Like, it's kind of neat. So, but gosh, I still think I'd be doing the same things. But it's fun to be able to share it with them, talk about progress I'm making on a new book or something like that, it's fun. It's fun. I bet your kids probably do like AR test. Like they read a book and they have to take like an AR test.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Reading score. Yeah, like, so I've been like, my son asked me, he's like, what's the reading level of Man in a Cage? Is there an AR test? Can I read it and like take the AR test? I'm like, no, I don't think so.
Silly things we make our kids do is
like you can read it, but I can't tell you like what the reading level is.
That's up to a company, buddy.
Literacy expert would have to tell you that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a K-12 educator myself. I could wax poetic for probably too long about the ways that we get in the way of kids enjoying reading, and slapping numbers on them is top five way to make a kid not enjoy the reading anymore.
Well, and we read the same stuff a lot too. Like they'll read a book and they're like, Dad, you got to read this. And so I'm like, okay, so I'll read it. And sometimes it's something really cool, and or I'll find things and recommend them to the kids. They're appropriate. So
that's fun. That's a fun age to be at. Speaking of kids, I have one trying to crash the party right here, and he's not allowed on camera. So if you've seen me doing a lot of looking to the side, I apologize.
Wait, what?
That is, you're not allowed on the camera, buddy. So, but we are also almost out of time. So my own parenting needs aside, I do want to make sure we get you out of here. But thank you very much. Thank you for that great answer too. Like I always, when people ask me, I largely write poetry, and I have a long time novel in progress that is definitely older than this kid. And people ask me like, how do you do it as a K-12 teacher? I'm like, lunch breaks. Like, I'm not social at work anymore. Like that's, I get 30-minute lunch. It's like jam as much in as you can, like just write like a maniac. And I love that you said walking the dog earlier. I'll do a lot of my first draft stuff is voice notes while commuting and walking the dog.
I have done that too. Yeah.
I feel you. I loved all your answers now. Like I'm doing a lot of nodding, like, oh, yep. Like I see myself in a lot of those.
Yeah, you just make it happen. If you've got to have some kind of ritual, like I've got to be at this desk with this pen and all these things in place, then you're never going to do it.
Yeah.
You're just going to let those things be a barrier. Like I probably wrote Man in a Cage in 50 different places on multiple borrowed laptops, just whatever it took that day to like get 100 words in.
Yeah. Just don't lose a notebook. Like, I've gotten set back before by handwriting some parts, and then like, I want to transcribe them later on, and then it's like, where did the handwriting?
Yeah, you got to hold on to those things.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I know you've got to go pick up a kid, so thank you very much, Patrick, for joining us tonight. This has been a real pleasure. I'm glad we were able to squeeze it in here. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Mitch. I appreciate it.
All right, viewers, thank you for joining us for Wednesday Night Sessions. We will see you next time.